So I believe we are live right now. So let's give a few moments and we get started. Hi, Matt. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Well, we are currently in rainy Prague. So I wish the weather was better, but how's London, or where are you based?
It's very classically London today in that it's nice and grey. So yeah,
We have similar sky.
We have a very like I'm in the office today. We have a very bright space that means I can see our lovely grey London skyline today, which is not super exciting, but better than being shut indoors.
And where in London do you have the office?
We are just off of Brick Lane in Shoreditch, so like right in the hub of we're a secondhand kind of clothing marketplace, and so we're right off where the big kind of secondhand clothing and vintage stores are in London, in Brick Lane. If you ever have been to London and you want a curry, this area is the place to go. It smells incredible basically all the time.
Sounds cool. Okay, so let's give it a few more minutes and we'll get started at 05.
Nice.
So people can join. I can see them joining. So let's wait for a bit. But London is quite famous for its vintage stores, right?
Yeah. I mean, Brick Lane especially is one of the largest secondhand marketplaces in the country. So there is this absolutely enormous vintage fair right around the corner from us. It's very cool. I always get tempted in, like trying to kind of hold on to my money at the moment is its own challenge, because I'm always tempted by the incredible clothing that I kind of walk past every day. That and the incredible food means I'll be coming out of here a poorer man for it.
Yeah, I was going on the street and I saw like really nice jeans in the vintage store. So I went in and like £500 for a pair of jeans. So like, I'm in the wrong place right now.
Yeah, you need to get to the vintage stores. Where they sell them for like 20 quid, not 500.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So let's wait for one more minute and then we can get started.
Trying to see who I recognize. There's a couple of people I recognize in the list here today. Yeah. Simon, obviously, we know. Darren, hello, friend. How's it going? I think Patrick I've met before. Caroline, I think it rings a bell.
Yeah.
Lots of great people here today.
Yeah, Dominica. Hi, Dominica. Also, no. Cool. I say let's get started. And anyway, we recording it. So then we will be sharing the recordings. We have a chat. Already first message for Darren. So great. You are here, so feel free for everyone who's joined to ask questions during the webinar, because this is primarily for you, and we want this webinar to be super practical, not that much theoretical, and this is why we have met. So without any further ado, hello everyone and welcome on our HR webinar. Today the topic is AI in talent operations, especially in talent acquisition. And for that, I want to welcome Matthew Parker, Head of Talent at Fleek, a marketplace for wholesale second-hand fashion. So Matt, thank you for accepting the invitation.
My pleasure. Lovely to be here. Nice to spend some time with you today, Tom. Looking forward to it.
Cool. So let's get started because you are a person in the kind of talent acquisition space in the UK, but we have many listeners on this webinar from across the Europe. So can you first kind of talk a little bit about how did you get to talent acquisition space and what was your journey here?
It would surprise no one that I fall into the category of fell into this job. I didn't start my kind of university career in my life thinking, yes, I really want to be a recruiter. But yeah, I was won over by the shiny lights of the London city skyscrapers, and I remember very vividly being in my first interview wearing an oversized suit on one of the tallest kind of buildings in London, looking over in a big mahogany like boardroom, thinking I've absolutely made it, talking about something that I really didn't understand. But I think what drove me to recruitment at the time was the amount that you could learn from speaking to like some of the leaders in your industry. I did an economics degree at the university, and in my first 3 months doing executive search, speaking to CEOs, CFOs in the banking industry, learned more about our kind of financial services industry than I did in a 3-year degree. And it was much, much more costly than my 3 months as well. But kind of fast forward today, I think what's really kept me in the industry is the impact, the outsized impact you can have on businesses when you do talent acquisition really, really well. These are growth engines to drive businesses forward. And I think there's never been a time where that's like been more relevant today. I think what gets me even more excited is around how you build systems and enable companies to do this at like a significant level of scale. And I think that is something that we're right on the precipice of like a foundational change of that. And being a part of a business that's trying to do that today is really exciting. And as what I've been doing at Muse and Zap and Procore, all these different levels of scales from Series A all the way through to publicly listed, it's all fundamentally answering the same question. How do you build a system that can enable you to attract, identify, and hold on to the best talent that can grow your business? And I think that's more fun to me than being in any other team.
So thank you for the intro. This is what you like about talent acquisition or the industry. What do you dislike about talent acquisition?
I mean, that could be its own webinar potentially. I think the challenge with talent acquisition is that it's its kind of own self-perpetuating Dunning-Kruger effect, in that everyone sort of thinks they know how to hire, and very few people actually do it very well, and even fewer people can do it well at scale. Everyone has an opinion, and I think that like everyone kind of feels that kind of they know best when it comes to hiring for their team. But the reality is that people in talent acquisition have hired thousands and thousands of people. I've facilitated the hiring of thousands of people through my career, and understand much more around like what it takes to build these sorts of systems at scale than people who have never done it before. And yet lots of people think that they know best, and so you're constantly in this kind of interesting battle of and kind of conversation and transformation of taking people on a journey of like what good looks like, and how to fast forward them through making some of the mistakes that they may not have to anymore, and how do you kind of support them in getting to that kind of outcome as quickly as possible. But yeah, there's definitely you're battling people's preconceived ideas of what your job is almost more than any other industry. You very rarely see people telling marketers how to do their job properly, or product people how to do their job properly, but you very often get people telling talent acquisition people that they're not doing their job right, or they should be doing this, or that's actually really easy. And behind the scenes, it's obviously a lot more complicated.
Right. As I said at the beginning, I want this webinar to be very practical, not theoretical, because the kind of theoretical is whole LinkedIn or full LinkedIn is theoretical, right? But I know that you are playing around, I would say, quite on an advanced level with AI. So can you please kind of walk us through or explain your current approach to AI in talent acquisition? What tools or stack are you using, where and how?
Yeah, sure. So this is obviously a big question, but I think kind of boiling it down to it, we have a really basic stack here in lots of respects. We have Ashby as our applicant tracking system, and we use like all the note takers and the capabilities that brings. So Ashby is already a very, very strong kind of tool at its heart. In the past, I've used things like Greenhouse. I've used Talentpilot once before as well, MetaView as well for kind of sourcing and recording interviews. But really where like the unlock has happened over the past few months, like for a lot of people, has been being able to take ownership of building tooling with and full agentic workflows with things like Claude Code and previously at scale with Glean. There's a couple of things that we built recently that we're just at the start of really looking at, but we set up our own custom MCP with Ashby, which basically enables us to extract an enormous amount of natural language data from what but it's happening within our applicant tracking system, which essentially, yes, it's a system of record, our applicant tracking system, but also it's a massive natural language database. Almost all recruiting conversations are natural language. Almost all of your notes and everything that you're filing in that CRM is a natural language interaction. And so being able to extract data from that at scale with natural language completely changes the level of autonomy you can have with how you interact with both the candidates and then also your business. So a couple of examples of how we've been able to do that here is we've set up a Claude Code with Claude Code, connecting via my MCP to things like Slack and Gmail, but then also Ashby. I'm able to produce like really, really detailed hyper custom reports for all of my stakeholders at any given time. So at the click of a button, it's able to extract exactly how their like recruiting funnel is performing, who the candidates are they're meeting that week, what the challenges are with the search, our pass-through rates when we're expecting that to hire, and give it real genuine insights around like the performance of their recruiting system. That's not just coming kind of from me, and obviously I kind of edit the reports as they go to them, but really it's able to pull just a massive amount of natural language data to be able to guide them through that. But then also I use this as a coach for myself as well. So it's able to understand what I'm working on every single week, where I'm investing my time in my interviews, what are kind of the systems that are playing well. So it can every single day, it sends me a message with like, here's your top 5 interviews today. Here's the pipeline that's performing well. Here's where you probably need to spend a bit more time because your pass-through rates are dropping off here. This is what's happening in the interview. So it's actually able to pull out natural language transcripts and say, these are the themes that we're seeing around candidates that are getting rejected. Here's the themes that are around the candidates that are progressing really, really well. How do we dial into that and make sure that that's kind of more part of kind of how we're working? And so from a reporting perspective, it's enabled us to, like, from day one with a small team, be able to have the power and structure of a much, much bigger team that has a whole analytics team sitting behind it. Ashby has a really good kind of data and reporting suite, but the ability to be able to custom exactly what you want in that data and be presented it to you in a really customizable way has been a real asset to our CEO and CTO here, so they can understand exactly what's happening at all times. So I think that's like part one. Part two is that we've been building, I've got like a recruitment coach, so it's always analyzing my interviews at any given time. So how am I positioning the role? How am I evaluating candidates? Am I being structured with how I'm approaching those candidates? Am I being potentially more lenient on some than others? And it's able to dial into the transcripts of my conversations, and all of them are recorded in Ashby. And every week, give me basically kind of a status report around how I'm performing and give me advice and feedback. And I posted about this on LinkedIn recently, but there was a couple of really useful unlocks in it pulled out. Like, you're pitching the business really well, but you're not giving any level of urgency on like the why now. And so you need to, make sure, like, try and kind of use the Series B announcement that we've got coming up as like a platform to drive that level of urgency in the candidates, so they're more kind of compelled. So there's a couple of really nice use cases. Something that we're building at the moment that we did build really well in Muse is a recruiting like asset creation agent. Like, one of the most challenging parts of most manual parts of a recruiter is building out and enabling the structure for an entire interview process. So from the moment that I absorb a job description, the moment that I do a briefing with a hiring manager, what is the structure that's going to enable us to hire a really high quality person? And a lot of that used to be me manually building out every single step of that in either our system or even in our documentation. And because of the architecture that we built behind the scenes, and like, we want every candidate to kind of go through this type of process, it's able to then build all of that out for me, including recommending like what skills we should be looking for, how we should evaluate those skills, how do we evaluate the AI capability for that kind of job family specifically, who should meet this person within our business, because it understands like who are the kind of key players in our company and who the key decision makers are. And it's reinforcing and learning all the time around how we're evaluating candidates and what we're like picking and choosing to evaluate and not evaluate. And then we can push that directly into our system as well. So it's becoming a really big kind of value add and making my life a lot easier. And in the future, one of the things we're trialing at the moment is like, how can we use that as like a center of record for all of the hiring managers, so it becomes an assistant to them to help them become a better hiring manager and interviewer. So it's using their transcripts from their interviews, plugging that into the kind of tool that we're building within our own kind of secure domain, so that it can kind of say, right, this candidate's probably scored quite well here based on what you were looking for initially, but they might not have scored quite as well here based on the scorecard that you built out initially as well. Have you been able to go into this in more detail and provide us with some coaching live, so that those debrief sessions can be much more dynamic and conversational? So we're really like just tapping into some of the core, bits here. We're really at the starting point, but we see like every single time someone comes to us with a new idea and we can actually build it. Whereas before, I think we would say that's a great idea and we'd leave it to the side. But now we're actually able to build a secure system that can really help and enable hiring managers to hire better people.
Yeah, that sounds great, but it leads me to a very specific question, right? Because we know what kind of a regulatory environment we all live in here in Europe, right? So what's your thinking about the typical buy versus build in terms of AI and talent acquisition? Will companies actually have the incentives to build AI in-house in this regulatory environment we are in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the decision-making process obviously will always be kind of held by a human, and there's a lot of good reasons why that's the case. And I think that's why having things like an applicant tracking system that is your like core system of record, I don't think that's something that people will build themselves. It's there's too much burden of proof around compliance. There's changing all the time. We need to be able to outsource essentially that mindset of that compliance to a third party that is always thinking about this all the time. And obviously it's our responsibility on the other side to challenge that and make sure they're keeping up to code. But you can't build like an applicant tracking system, I don't think, yourself right now. It's too high risk. We even looked at doing that here and we concluded that the same thing, managing the data and the records and the interactions and the security that goes around that is just so high risk. It's not worth trying to build. However, there's, I think, a lot of things that businesses can do today that will enable them that won't kind of fall under these laws. So for example, something that we're building at the moment is a referral agent. So this is something that scans that people sign up for, and it's able to use free tooling to scan their LinkedIn networks. And I can kind of go through and look at matches within their LinkedIn network against the job description that I have been kind of looking for. And using kind of the calibration that I built on the back end, we'll be able to say, all right, hey, Tom, I noticed these 3 candidates in your network look like a really strong match for our, head of product role, and would you be comfortable introducing me? And those are all free, publicly accessible tools that won't be in conflict of any laws, because it's not, we're not managing those candidates. They haven't applied for this role. It's part of our kind of sourcing engagement, and enables us to have just better access to things that we would have been able to do, historically. And there are tools out there that do this today, but we're able to build that with a £20 Lovable subscription and a couple of really good plugins to us, which is not, and it's not that complex. And it's going to enable us to really have a much bigger understanding of like our entire talent universe here, in a way that we could not really have had before. And so even just basic things like that are not like an asset builders. These are not things that are going to be kind of falling foul of any GDPR laws or compliance environments, but they are things that are going to make us more efficient. The last thing I would say is that, the MCP that we built with Ashby, and they're going to be releasing more updates to this, but that ability to be able to move away from click through a different, clicking through different flows to be able to get to your outcome, and actually being able to interact text-based with a agent that sits within a compliance system that can go and execute commands on your behalf. These are the things that are going to be like the true unlocks, I think, in the next couple of years for HR specifically, because there are so many ostensibly automation flows that are not really built properly. And there's lots of kind of copying and pasting of information and from place to place to place. And I think that will be where we are able to really unlock an enormous amount of time for both HR teams, but especially for TA teams. If I want to do scheduling, for example, I shouldn't have to click through a bunch of different buttons to do that. I should be able to say, schedule Tom with my finance director for 30 minutes this week. And it should be able to do that and automate that entire experience for me. And that's not something that is kind of currently accessible.
Yeah. You describe a lot of things where AI is helping you in your role. So my question would be, how is the role of the recruiter changing in the age of AI? Because from what you describe, it's a lot about kind of managing the AI, telling the AI what you want, and more like process-driven kind of role. So how would you describe it?
Yeah, I think that is, very few companies are doing like this sort of work at the moment, and very few systems are set up. So I kind of describe it a future state rather than a current state, I would say, even of our kind of more advanced uses of different MCPs and stuff like that. But broadly, I think I see over time, our recruiters will be dialed into the things that are most human about their role. And I think that falls into kind of 2 categories. One is you need to be able to engage and engage with candidates, right? I think recruiters are going to be in an uncomfortable position where their systems will be strong enough that and their sourcing will be kind of commoditized enough where ostensibly they'll be able to do 20, 25 calls a week. And I think that will actually be quite an uncomfortable place for a lot of recruiters for the next couple of years, where they're more maybe used to doing kind of 10 or 15 if you're in a white collar role. And actually we need to be targeting 20 to 25, because that's actually human connection is the most valuable part of your job. And then attached to that, the other side is how do you engage with the business, and how deeply do you understand and spend time with the business to help them find the kind of right opportunities and build the architecture behind how they're building their teams. That is going to be the other really critical part of your job. And so your ability to build really good sourcing capability, manage top of funnel, really complexity. I think those are the things that are going to become increasingly more automated to enable you to build deep human connections. The thing that worries me though is that over time, people will become more comfortable interacting with AI at the top of the funnel. And they potentially will be agent to agent interactions. I was talking to someone the other day around what happens if you could plug your Claude code into your application, and that it could actually understand your skills because it has built a massive knowledge base of you as an individual against what this company is looking for, because their AI has got to learn their business and what's really successful for their company. And actually, I think that will happen, I think, at some point, if it's not happening already. And that, I think, will foundationally change what the individual role of a recruiter will be. And I think we'll then see these two pathways diverge, where we'll have a talent engineer and operator who's building this massive system of orchestrating really, really complex AI conversations essentially across their business. And then you will have a executive search specialist whose job it is if I want to speak to Tom and I don't know Tom, I'm going to pay you. Your job is to get to know Tom. And get to know the 7 people in the world who can do a job like Tom's. And that is what I'm going to pay you for. And executive search will become an increasingly more valuable part of the talent stack in the coming years.
And do you think a company can create or build a competitive advantage in its market?
In regards to AI?
Yeah.
I think that's a good question. I mean, right now we're seeing that employer branding is the competitive advantage that is enabling people to self-select in or out of businesses a lot more kind of easily than it was before. So people want to engage with companies that they have become attracted to via social media. And I think that will be that is going to be the kind of the core decision-making process for lots of really, really good people. I think what will be harder is for new companies who have the future kind of very, very cool thing, who don't have necessarily an effervescent CEO who's on social media the entire time, how will they attract and engage with talent? I think that's going to be a much harder conversation, because sourcing is going to become commoditized in the next few years. Everyone is going to be able to send hundreds of emails and know who every single person is on the talent at any given time. Yeah. So how do you break down those barriers to get that person on the phone so that they, if you don't have a brand, can speak to you individually? And I think that will be where human connection and the craft of a recruiter will come back into it will almost go full circle. And the Rolodex will become an increasingly important part of people's capabilities and what you're purchasing in your recruiter. These repetitive, go and hire 20 Python engineers or whatever. I just don't think those sorts of roles will exist in a couple of years' time. But the can you pick up the phone to those people and can you build that human connection? That's going to be the kind of differentiator.
Yeah, you talk a lot about building the human connection. So I need to ask, what do you think about AI interviews? Because it's a very controversial topic today. So what do you think about them? Do you think they will prevail in the future, or it will evolve to something else? So what do you think about interviews?
Yeah, where I'm seeing this work well, I think, is in self-selected interviews. So when I voluntarily am signing up to be interviewed by AI because I believe there's a better ROI for me. So even when you see this, when you take this from the side of a sourcing tool like a Dex or a Jack and Jill or something like that, I think that more and more people will be more interested in going down those like recruiting agent paths than they will do going down the path of like applying for roles and for going and like being kind of put through an AI interview at the start of a process, because they see that there's something really clear that's in it for them. They don't have to to speak to a recruiting agent, a recruiting agency who's going to give them a 20-minute interview and then just spam them across to loads of different businesses. They can actually take agency of that kind of interaction. So I'd see a future world where potentially companies start to outsource their top of funnel entirely to these agents to manage that for them, because candidates can self-select in and out when they want. But I think we are slightly too early still for a top of funnel agent that's interviewing people. We ran an experiment at Muse and it kind of had a mixed success, I would say, in that some people really liked it and we saw some new behaviors that we hadn't seen before, but definitely there was a lot of people in it who were like, I don't have time for this. And I think until we can get really good candidates going through that process, because it's an established part of like how they think and work, because that's the world that we now live in, that will be like the kind of game break. It's more like cultural than it is like an actual process issue right now.
Where do you currently see the biggest blockers in AI adoption in talent acquisition teams?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think that a lot of it is a nervousness around getting it wrong from a compliance perspective. And, I've spoken to companies big and small on how, if you look at, like I was talking to a company the other day and their legal team is advising them that they can't use LinkedIn Hiring Assistant because it breaches New York, some of the New York laws around sourcing and kind of bias in sourcing, and having an informed ranker basically as part of the top of the funnel, which I don't personally agree with. I don't see the law that way, but that's a listed business that is taking that high like risk aversion approach. And so I think that nervousness around like what can and can't we do from a legal perspective is still super unclear and is being built like live. And I think that's part one. And then also part two is that talent acquisition doesn't often control the systems. We are, especially in a bigger business, we are kind of held to account by people operation systems. It's held centrally. It's in a COE. It's in the IT team, etc., where there is kind of a mixed understanding of like what can and can't be done. And actually, it's not something that we own and have control over. And I think whilst that control is sat somewhere else, we will always struggle to get kind of full use out of our AI tooling. And the last bit is just break stuff and like see what happens. And again, like we are a risk. We live in such a risk kind of environment right now for talent acquisition, and we can't really take the Uber approach here to a certain extent. It takes a very specific type of business who's going to have that type of risk tolerance to do that. And so ultimately, it comes down to like I think a general nervousness. But again, what can you do? That's where I would start. What are the things that are going to help you right now in making your life easier? And there are things that every single talent acquisition team can do today. For example, those recruiting assets. That's not a complex product. You can do that right now, and it can save your team tens of hours a month.
Yeah, that's 100% correct. But there are kind of currently many companies who are contemplating how to kind of implement, where to start with AI in talent acquisition, which I understand what you're saying. So like if you kind of were to invest in one AI initiative in talent acquisition, would it be what you just described? So kind of more tapping the AI assistant on top of your data that is like as not kind of regulatory heavy as other initiatives?
Yeah, it's a good question. Where would I start? I'd start with like looking at the processes that you kind of currently run today and what are the things that recruiters are doing all the time. And it'll be something like reporting and like hygiene and stuff like that. I was talking to someone at Microsoft, and obviously they're highly regulated large business, and even things like automatically sending reports every single week around like hiring performance, layering that over into your different conversations that you're happening. That's Copilot able to pull out of your system and then send to you. Like almost every company has some sort of internal knowledge base that's connected to a number of different transcription tooling now. And so how can you pull all of these kind of disparate data sets together to create automated reporting so that your hiring managers know exactly what's happening? And I see like that's a basic, really. All recruiters should be sending weekly reports to their hiring managers. But the reason they don't is because they're busy doing their actual job. And it means that it makes it harder for them to manage their hiring teams. And so this is a very easy fix, like spending an hour or two to build an agent that in a compliant environment with your existing tooling that will almost certainly exist, that can enable you to do that at scale like today, and make you also, and that will improve the quality of relationship that you have with your hiring teams. On the candidate side, it's a little bit more complex. Think things like sourcing tools are absolutely evolving at rapid pace right now. And so if you are still using like LinkedIn Recruiter as your core outreach tool and your core sourcing tool, you're very behind. Things like Juicebox, things like MetaView, etc., are able to map and identify the market at play in such a micro level of detail now that you're massively behind if you're still using like LinkedIn Recruiter old school today.
Yeah.
What I would say, just to kind of flip this though, I do think that the burden of proof on these laws are wrong. The burden of proof assumes that AI is inherently biased, which I think is probably fair. However, it does never take into account that humans are definitely inherently biased. And so instead of looking at through the lens of AI, like we need to be using AI to like AI, if we use AI, therefore that will be biased. We need to think about how can we use AI to audit the human process to make sure that they are not biased. And really the laws should be reframed around this like critical enablement of humans to become less biased. And I think over time, AI will be seen as the go-to way to reduce that bias, not the other way around. And at the moment, that assumption is flipped and that mentality is flipped. And I think if you follow like the teams at Deal, they firmly are seeing that like this is wrong. The foundational concepts around how these laws are built do not enable either the candidate or the business to be successful, and they are holding all parties back. And when we like push the curve on this, and especially if we have control around on the back end, and if you have a control around like what the systems are in place and how you're evaluating candidates, those are all things that are compliant still to be able to do that. You just have to be really, really strong at building and knowing exactly how your system is grading candidates on the back end. But most people don't do that. But if you can audit that really successfully and build a very kind of thoughtful way of how you do it, I think that is how we will flip the narrative. And it is up to all of us to flip that narrative internally as well, to say, actually, you're thinking about this the wrong way around. Let's start with our humans are biased, and let's work backwards from there on how we rebuild our systems around that assumption.
Yeah, but then we are talking about what type of impact AI can have on a business. And I think the kind of common understanding today is that it's primarily kind of cost saving tool, like let's save hours, let's increase productivity. But what do you see that AI can also have an impact on other more like business oriented outcomes than just kind of cost saving and saved hours?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely. I think let's kind of start with like this a natural language. So ultimately, the role of the recruiter will always be to hire high quality people as quickly as possible, and that's never going to change because that enables the business to grow. And so therefore, how do we make sure that we are identifying what the true needs are of the business to be able to enable them to grow successfully? So like that will be something that a recruiter can do, and I think AI will enable us to do better, because it will be able to analyze our business better and analyze our team better. So for example, something we were doing at Muse was layering on performance data with hire engagement data that would inform how we would approach that hire or how we'd approach that role. So if you have for example, a team or a leader of that team who's consistently getting poor engagement scores and low performance data, that should meaningfully impact how you build a process to enable yourself to hire better. So like that is again, all of this stuff is accessible by your existing tooling that can plug into your centrally controlled, like secure AI, and you can layer these things together. We were using Glean to be able to do that, but it meant we weren't having a situation where B players were hiring C players and C players were hiring D players. And so that is a critical gate that you can build like right now that will improve the quality of your hiring. So I think that's definitely kind of part one.
Yeah, I can see that we have a few comments, a few questions from the audience. I have my final two questions, but we can jump into the audience questions. So first one is that Annette said that they want to move away from LinkedIn Recruiter. What would you recommend?
Yeah, so from like a sourcing tool perspective, I have been quite impressed by MetaView, and the reason why is not because it produces the best like search rankings. Like let's assume that that's fine and that they all are ostensibly the same. But the way that I think about search is my fundamental problem with like MetaView and Juicebox and stuff like that is that they start with, we want to get you 10 people who look right for your role. And I actually think that's a fundamentally like flawed approach, because it means that you can't interrogate whether or not those are the best 10 people. Those are just the best people that they've shown you at that time. So you can't say, if those 10 people don't respond to you, you can't go back to them and say, well, that's like, this is what the market is. You have no data you can give them. It's essentially like using a recruiting agency. However, if you take it as I want to map all of the people who exist within this market who could be relevant for your role. I need to map all software engineers that work for these types of companies that have this type of tech stack. The tools can do this for you now in a way that was never really possible before, and a speed that was never possible before. So I ran a multi-hundred company search, identifying every single software engineer that all use this specific language, and I was able to do that with like an 80 to 85% level of accuracy. And now I have my total addressable market for a role. And now I think about, how do I source and engage with that group in an effective way? And it could be emails, it could be LinkedIn messages, it could be LinkedIn Recruiter. I think that's one of the things that LinkedIn Recruiter will own for a long time. But like, it's the foundation of like how you think about your top of funnel, and from a total addressable market perspective, and work backwards from there, not just, I need the top 5 people, I just need 5 people. Like, I think that's the wrong framing of it. So I think if you can get like MetaView or similar to do a Juicebox, I haven't quite got there yet, because it's not a total addressable market approach. So that doesn't align with my approach philosophically, but obviously they've raised a buttload of money and like, good for them. But for me, I don't personally see that as like the future.
Yeah, I recently tested the new beta from Jack and Jill for sourcing. I was fairly impressed by what they've done. I really like their approach. So this might be another one for.
Yeah, I use Jack and Jill. What I would say is that I still think that there is a gap here between, like, I don't really want to pay and spend my time sourcing candidates. To be honest, I want to be able to buy the outcome of a booked call in my diary with a good candidate. And all I care about is, have I got 20 calls this week with good candidates? That's the only thing that I should care about as a recruiting leader. And so how do I build a system that enables me to do that really, really well? And I think that will be the future of sourcing. It won't be set up your outreach sequences, here's your market, blah, blah, blah. Like, I think we need to get to the point of, here's just 20 calls that you can book into your diary every single week, and we can build the system for you that gets you that outcome. That's going to be valuable. This all at the moment is just like window dressing around like essentially LinkedIn Recruiter. I want to get to that outcome as quick as possible.
Look, every other product today calls it the beta for a reason, right? That we know we need to get to the point what you just described. Another question from Annie. I think this is related to the AI interviews. How do you tackle candidates who may not be as articulate, which could result in losing out on good candidates?
I mean, look, I think it's kind of contextual around like, how important is it your business that they're good communicators? And obviously interviews are their own skill, I guess. And you're not hiring people who are good at interviewing, you're hiring good at people, ideally looking for people who are good at your job. And so how do you build an entire process that enables people to be really strong at showcasing their role? And how do you index for that in your process? However, almost all business, like we could not hire someone who, even if they were good at their job, couldn't articulate what their problems were that they were trying to solve. And that is a foundational challenge. So like, yes, you can cut like that, I guess could be a reason. But for me, like the ability to articulate yourself is a foundational piece of what we're evaluating people for. Especially in this era where AI can do a lot of like the heavy lifting. It's that ability to then evaluate whether or not that output you get from the AI is good enough to be able to send on to another person. And I think that is its own issue, which we're trying to solve for.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. My final 2 questions. So what's one unpopular opinion you have about AI in talent acquisition that most people kind of disagree with you on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to this point of we assume that the AI is biased without looking at ourselves first. Really, I think that's like a foundational issue and a foundational assumption that's wrong that we need to all challenge ourselves on today. All of your recruiters are biased. And so how do you audit their bias? And what is the assumption that you build into your like system that you can reduce that as much as physically possible? So I think that's one. I think the other is that like people who currently are hiring 20 of the same role a year are not going to have a job in 2 to 3 years time. I think that AI interviewing will take this away eventually. And it may not happen today, may not happen in 2 years time, but if that is predominantly what you do in your job today, you need to be really deeply thinking about what you do next, because you will not have that job in 2 years time.
Yeah. We have a new question from Patrick. As a job seekers, what AI tools would you recommend and why?
Yeah, it's hard for me to answer this question because I'm not actively in the job market at the moment. However, on the other side of it, I don't genuinely think that there are any tools that can kind of help you as a job seeker in getting access to more roles or finding kind of better jobs. I think you can use like scrapers and set up an agent within Claude Code, etc., that enables you to maybe identify opportunities. But ultimately, like something that is applying to jobs on your behalf, I don't think is going to get you the outcome that you're looking for. What I would recommend is build something. Make sure that you can turn up into that interview without just saying like, yeah, I use like ChatGPT and that's quite cool. Show me an automation that you have built. Show me something you've built with AI. Show me that you are using this every single day and that you've maybe put a bit of your own money into like building a flow. That is really cool. And we ask every single person, like, how are you using AI today? And most people still say, I use ChatGPT to help me write something. And that is, I think, increasingly not going to be a good enough answer. And it isn't a good enough answer here. But if you can show me that you've built something and you're really passionate about what you've built, and that shows that you've gone above and beyond and spent a bit of time, spent a bit of money to learn something new, and that you're already on that like kind of slope of AI learning. To the extent that here, we also recognize that not every business gives you that opportunity. So we give every candidate here access to Claude Code when they go into their task stage, because we want to see, if you were given the time and resources, how quickly could you learn something new? Because we might not all be using Claude Code in a year's time. It could be something else. But the ability to pick it up, build something new, and understand your way around it, that's going to be the skill. And so you need to be able to showcase that skill as quickly as physically possible.
Yeah, I think AI literacy will be a very big part of CVs in the very near term future, and we can start seeing it in our class customers who are requiring, as you said, candidates tell us how do you use AI, what tools, what stack, etc. So I agree with you.
Well, I mean, that's assuming that CVs will be the method of application in 2 years' time. I mean, it could not be a better example of how obsolete they are. And that is why I think genuinely that people will find a way to plug in, your Claude Code backend access into an application, because it's probably a much more realistic view of your capabilities on who you are as a person, or will be soon, or something like that. Like, it's essentially the technology equivalent of being able to show someone your GitHub. And I don't know how this will work in a few years' time, but I genuinely do not foresee a world where we are using CVs and it will be some sort of AI backend that they have access to that will match on your behalf.
100%. Final question.
What's your controversial take, Tom?
Mine. I actually very much like what Jack and Jill is doing. So I believe that every person will have an AI agent that will know what my AI capabilities, my background, my preferences and everything. So I think that the first kind of screening round will be just agent to agent. And then if there is obvious match, let's help humans to do what they're best at, right? It's building the human connection as you talked about. So it's my I hope that we'll get there sooner rather than later. Final question for you. Like I said, there are many TA teams that are just getting started with AI. So what would you advise them?
I heard a really good piece of advice recently, which was to not. I think a lot of people just say like, go build stuff, and they like kind of go and everyone runs around and like builds like tiny little things, and then they kind of get it to 80% and then go, oh, it doesn't work, and so they leave it, and it like loses that momentum. I think a better way that I heard recently is breaking down, identifying a problem specifically and breaking it down into a sprint where everyone is around like aligned against a goal that they're trying to achieve over a 2-week period, and then everyone's focused on like, how could you use AI to solve this problem? And that I think will unlock, a slightly better mentality and focus around like, we want to get to this point. help us get here. You focus on this bit, you focus on this bit, you focus on this bit, like bring it out like you would do a product development sprint, or like do like a hackathon day, so that everyone is building together, everyone's learning together, everyone's going, oh wow, like this is cool, this thing I just built. Like imagine if we could do that, and then make sure someone is there to take it over the finish line. Lots of your team will be able to create an 80% viable product in a day. But who is going to get it that extra 20%, and have someone who's assigned to that as an owner to get that over the line and push it into production and enable it. AI still needs business transformation. You can't just use it and then build it and then put it into the live environment. Like any software tool you purchase, it doesn't solve the problem when you purchase it. It solves the problem when you implement it and use it as a business transformation tool. So like think about that as well, because otherwise your teams will have technology fatigue, your hiring manager will have technology fatigue, like it becomes its own problem. It creates a new problem. So focus on something specific and orient your team around it.
Matt, it was great talking to you. When recruiters or HR people are asking me what they should do to, avoid being laid off, I'm usually replying, make yourself irreplaceable, be like Matthew Parker and your agents. So thank you very much, Matt, again. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Really appreciate the time. Hope that was useful. Cheers.